In the last video, I talked about why Dante brought Force Edge and not Rebellion to Malay Island. Now, a fun little fact is that there was supposed to be another part to that video, but I'd scrapped it since I felt like it was getting off topic and it deserved to be its own thing. And that video in question was basically answering another question about this whole thing of Dante bringing the Force Edge to Malay Island, which indirectly answers why Dante didn't have Devil Trigger at the start of DMC1 when we know he awakened it permanently back in DMC3. In that last video, there were several people that kept saying that Rebellion never existed in DMC1, and I expect that some people might say something similar here. Something about DMC3 retconning the lore and yada yada yada. I'm well aware that that's the case, and like I said in my pinned comment, it changes nothing for me. I still like to retroactively theorize for fun. If I can go on a bit of a tangent, I'm going to use an example from the Zelda series, where in the second game, Zelda 2 or Adventure of Link, there's names for its different towns in the game, and these names are special because they would later appear in the first 3D Zelda game, Ocarina of Time. In the real world, clearly the developers just thought it would be neat to reuse these names for specific characters in the game. In the timeline though, Ocarina of Time comes before Zelda 2, so it's more like the sages of Ocarina of Time are being honored by being the name of different towns centuries later. That's what this is similar to. The reality and lore answers are two separate things, they aren't one and the same. I hope that quells those type of comments, but I really can't control what the audience does, so all I can really do is just clarify. Anyways, just like last time, I'll give some context so everyone's on the same page, but this time I'll actually start with some of your theories and then my own for a change. I'll give my thoughts on these theories and then share my own personal theory after both. So, let's get into the background info. Of course, as we all know, Rebellion is one of the blades that Sparta gifted to his sons, more specifically Dante. Dante would continue to use this blade all his life like any human capable of sword fighting would, but unknown to him, he hadn't tapped into his own Devil Trigger, and this sword would be the key to that. Later on, Arkham would kickstart the events of DMC3 and beckon Dante to make his way to the top of the giant tower, Temenegru, to confront Virgil. Dante is successful in reaching the very top. After a heated battle with his twin brother, Dante lost. His amulet was taken, and his sword as well. In an act of persistence though, he tried to get up and fight, but Virgil rushed back to pierce the rebellion back into Dante's chest again for good. However, this only ignited a fury in Dante, and his Devil Trigger awakened. Dante soon collapsed from exhaustion, and ever since then, Rebellion has always been in its awakened state, notable by the skull and the sword screaming out in the opening of the guard itself. And after this, we know Dante would continue to use the Rebellion for years to come. It's a pretty vital weapon for the guy. Some may even argue the relationship between this Devil Arm and Dante is far stronger than Dante's other Devil Arms. This is what commenter In Reverse Production argues. They say that the reason why Dante had no Devil Trigger with Force Edge was because he didn't connect with the weapon in the same way he did with Rebellion or other Devil Arms, and I think this makes sense. Rebellion is basically Dante's ride or die, but looking at the other Devil Arms in and post DMC1, Dante's Devil Trigger is present with them, but Force Edge is a unique case where there just isn't a Devil Trigger for it at all. Immediately after Force Edge, you have Alistair that awakens his DT in the game in the first place, more on that later, and you have Ifrit that also has DT available, Nightmare Beta that uses DT for stronger attacks, and think of all the Devil Arms that Dante gets in DMC4, Gilgamesh, Pandora, Lucifer. You can access DT with those weapons too. Even when Force Edge transforms into the legendary Devil Sword Sparta, it has a Devil Trigger, even if it's forced into being restricted to solely Mundus, but when we look at the Force Edge's base form, there is no Devil Trigger. In Reverse Productions also argues that Dante perhaps doesn't see the Force Edge as his own weapon and sees it solely as his father's. When Virgil uses the weapon in DMC3, he gets to use summon swords, but with Dante, there's nothing. It's indistinguishable from a regular blade that humans would use for demon standards at least. They also say this could be caused by a mental block from Dante, as he sees the weapon only as his father's and only accepts the weapon when embracing it after forming the perfect amulet from the defeat of Nello Angela. At least from what I'm understanding with what In Reverse Productions is saying, Dante can't use Devil Trigger with Force Edge because first, his connection with the weapon is very weak compared to other Devil Arms like Rebellion, but also second, Dante still hasn't embraced the weapon, and while he has in fact awakened to his purpose in the world and his heritage, hence the name Dante's Awakening for Devil May Cry 3, he hasn't accepted it. It is only after that acceptance that Dante can actually use the true strength of the Force Edge and tap into a Devil Trigger. It looks reminiscent of his own father and could possibly be even stronger than his own, I would assume. This is an interesting take to me, as it gives a mental look into why Dante couldn't use Devil Trigger or the Force Edge. It's like a rite of passage. Only after accepting his heritage and purpose could he actually tap into that power as a strong connection is established. This is gonna sound very random and like it came out of nowhere, but in a way it kind of reminds me of how Bleach's Zanpakuto work, with how you must form a strong and healthy bond with the spirit to get anywhere as a Shinigami. For example, the arc Ichigo goes through before he can really tap into more of his potential. Ichigo spends much of the story running away from his true Zanpakuto spirit and only reaches a higher potential when he embraces both spirits within him and recognizes both of them as part of himself. I am assuming that's a similar angle being approached by In Reverse Productions. But even when Dante obtains Devil Trigger in DMC1, he doesn't really stay in the form like the other games. He only really does that when he's attacking, so why is that? Well, according to Commodore Azure Kite, Mundus might have placed some sort of spell in Malay Island that negated a bit of Dante's devil power, which could be the reason Dante's Devil Trigger seems kind of incomplete. This is another plausible theory when we look at Mundus' character. He's really not foreign to trickery and manipulation. He first manipulated Virgil into serving his army, and then created a clone of Dante's mother and sent out that clone to emotionally manipulate Dante into going into his island. Mundus is clearly a being with high intelligence to bend things over to his will and manipulate people. I really wouldn't put it past him that he casted some sort of incantation to negate or reduce Dante's devil power. And I think something else we have to remember is Malay Island itself is kind of strange. It's always been quite wicked and under a powerful magic, which we see in the exposition of the game, which I think this has to be the work of Mundus. There's really nobody else this could be, in my opinion. First off, the island seems to just move anywhere, to the strangest locations too, mind you, and its location is always closest to the underworld, so... Additionally, the weather and seasons are inconsistent according to the Castellian. In some places the flowers die quickly, while in others they're seemingly immortal. And for the general inhabitants, the crops meant for winter are harvested in summer, and vice versa. There's just a lot of paranormal activity, and it causes the insanity that runs through for the Castellians and ordinary folk. So, what's the point of all this? What is it supposed to mean? Well, it's supposed to show that Mundus isn't new to casting evil magic to cause abnormality, chaos, and insane things to happen. It's more evidence to show that Mundus restricting Dante's devil power would really not be out of the realm of possibility. I think Azure Kite's theory of Mundus negating Dante's devil power is very much possible. And that just leaves me now, and I think my theory will be very interesting to all of you. I believe that Rebellion may be mandatory to maintain Devil Trigger's appearance and its strength for Dante, which explains why he didn't have the form with Force Edge. Let me explain what I mean. So like I said before, in Devil May Cry 3, Devil Trigger is unlocked after the sword is awakened from impaling Dante. But you may have noticed how in the other entries, Dante has Devil Trigger right from the start. DMC4, DMC5, and yes, ironically enough, even DMC2. And what do these games all share in common? Dante started with Rebellion. Even the 2007 anime in the fight with Abigail or Sid, it's believed that Dante might have used Devil Trigger Explosion from Devil May Cry 3 when the two are in a clash. And what weapon does Dante use throughout the entire anime, which even takes place after DMC1? That's right, the Rebellion. Even in DMC5, yeah, it breaks in the first fight with Urizen, however, Dante also keeps the broken piece of the blade, and he kept it around for a while honestly until he got to his old home and used it along with the Sparta to make Devil Sword Dante. So maybe even the smallest piece of Rebellion still holds a large quantity of demonic power, enough for him to still be able to fully tap into his demonic form. Which is also funny when you consider how a small portion of the Yamato was able to allow Balrog to escape out of the underworld according to one of the novels, further supporting the statement of how even the smallest fragments of these weapons, Rebellion and Yamato, contain some impeccable amounts of power. Not only that, but I'm going to give a casual reminder that Rebellion is part of the equation that allows Dante to go into Sin Devil Trigger form, a new demonic form with far greater power even if it's difficult to stay in the form for very long. It's actually quite similar to when the Blade awakened back in DMC3 when you think about it. Both instances involve Dante being stabbed with Rebellion and also gaining more access to his demonic power as a result. In DMC3, Dante collapsed after using DT for the first time, while in DMC5, once the Sin Devil Trigger gauge runs out, you can see Dante fall to a knee. So clearly the form is taking a toll on him. It's an improvement from being out cold, but the premise is similar, where using the form for the first time is unfamiliar, so it can be taxing on Dante's stamina. And perhaps with more usage, Dante can maintain the form for longer amounts of time and not have as much stamina depleted. I make those parallels to show that Rebellion has been a crucial part of unlocking new demonic power, so it would only make sense that the Blade is also needed to maintain that power as well. This would provide another explanation for why Dante's DT seems incomplete in DMC1, where the demon form only shows in specific attacks like Vortex, Air Raid, Kick 13 to name a few. Alistair may have awakened DT and Dante in DMC1, but perhaps its demonic strength is nowhere close to how powerful Rebellion's strength is, and that would make sense because guess who made the Rebellion in the first place? That's right, Sparta himself, one of the most powerful demons in this series, and this is 1/3 of his power we're talking about. I'm sure even that small amount of power can outclass pretty much all the demons in the demon world, even 2 millennia later. That's just how strong he is. After all, Force Edge is another single third of his power, and look at how Arkham ended up when he tried using it. With Rebellion in possession, Dante's DT is clearly more complete. He enters that form for the duration of the time he's in it, and not just when he's attacking. But without it, he takes on this strange looking form that looks alien and even strange for a demon. So Rebellion seems to be needed for keeping the strength and form at the top of their game for Dante, since it's imbued with 1/3 of the legendary Dark Knight's power, so anything else is just kinda lesser. Also, let's be fair, Dante probably doesn't even need Devil Trigger to fight demons. He canonically only uses Devil Trigger in a pinch when times are tough, which is pretty rare in the series. In Force Edge, it's still a powerful blade lore-wise, and DMC1 may not do a good job of showing it, but this is still that powerful blade that sealed the demon world and got Arkham mutated because he couldn't handle its raw strength. It is still that blade from all those years ago. So what need would you have for your Devil Trigger when you have such a strong weapon piled on top of already stellar combat capabilities and insanely fast regeneration times? In other words, it's also possible that Dante just didn't need to channel Devil Trigger with Force Edge, since he's at the apex when it comes to strength with demons more often than not. And those are 3 theories looking at why Dante didn't have Devil Trigger with Force Edge. Which theory did you like the most? What's your own theory on this matter? Let me know in the comment section below. Also, thank you for the commenters for allowing me to take a look at your theories from the previous video. Thank you so much for your input. Thank you for your time, everyone. I hope to see you in the next video. Peace out, ciao, goodbye, all of that.